The rain wasn't heavy, not the kind that forced you under an awning or made you curse your luck. It was softer than that, misty, persistent, the kind that lingered in the air like an unspoken thought. Elon Musk stood on the corner of a quiet street in downtown Chicago, his usual entourage nowhere in sight. His flight had been diverted, his schedule scrambled, and now, instead of a sleek car with tinted windows and a driver who knew his every preference, he found himself flagging down a yellow taxi cab like a tourist. He could have called someone, could have waited, but for some reason he didn't understand, not then. He raised his hand and stepped into the cab. The door shut with a soft thunk. "Where to?" came the voice from a front. Calm, measured, no hint of recognition. Elon hesitated. Hyatt Regency River Walk. The man nodded once, checked his rearview mirror, and pulled into traffic. No small talk, no glance of celebrity awe. Just two men, one behind the wheel, the other behind years of headlines. Elon glanced at the back of the driver's head. He was older, salt and pepper hair visible under a worn gray cap. Shoulders hunched slightly, movements deliberate. There was a calm about him, not the kind that comes from indifference, but the kind that feels earned. The city outside was awash in reflections, taillights bleeding into puddles, street lamps glinting off wet asphalt, people scurrying with umbrellas and late-night groceries. It all blurred into a moving watercolor behind the window. Elon leaned his head back, closed his eyes briefly, but didn't sleep. His mind wandered through the usual channels, deadlines, rockets, staffing changes, but then, almost against his will, drifted to the driver. There was music playing, not loudly, something old, something meaningful, a soft piano, jazz maybe, a single track on loop, like the car had been set to one forgotten station for years. "You always drive nights?" Elon asked, breaking the silence. The man's eyes flicked to the mirror. "Mostly. Quiet city at night. That's why I like it." Elon nodded slowly, watching the way the man's hands rested gently on the steering wheel. No jerks, no tension, just presence. They drove in silence again. Then, as they stopped at a red light, Elon saw it on the dashboard, beside the meter, a photograph. Faded but carefully kept. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9, smiling wide, missing a tooth, her arm wrapped around a golden retriever. In the background, a modest house, a tree full of blossoms. "That your daughter?" Elon asked quietly. The man didn't answer right away. Then, with the faintest smile, "She was." There was a weight to that word, that pressed down on the air between them. "I'm sorry," Elon said and meant it. "She loved spring," the man said. "Told me the trees looked like they were wearing dresses." They turned a corner. The wipers made a gentle squeak. The world kept moving. For a long moment, neither said anything more. Then the driver asked, "You travel a lot?" "Too much," Elon admitted. "Ever sit still?" Elon blinked. "Not really." The man nodded again, like he'd already guessed the answer. "You ever wonder what you're running toward?" That question didn't come with judgment. It was offered like a cup of tea. And Elon didn't answer, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how. They arrived at the hotel sooner than Elon expected. The ride had gone fast, like some rides do when something underneath them moves more than just wheels. "How much do I owe you?" Elon asked, reaching for his wallet. The driver paused, then said, "This one's on me." Elon frowned. "Come on, let me pay you." The man turned in his seat, his eyes calm but serious. "No need. You're carrying enough." He handed Elon a small folded piece of paper. Nothing ornate, just plain, white, creased once. "If you want to know why," he said, "read this when you're ready." Then he turned back to the wheel. Elon stepped out into the rain, still holding the paper. The cab pulled away slowly, disappearing into the mist. And Elon, billionaire, innovator, thinker of tomorrows, stood under the awning of the Hyatt, clutching a piece of paper from a stranger whose voice had been quieter than the storm. Elon stood still, louder than most, folded paper in his palm, gathering mist. He wasn't the kind of man who hesitated often. His days were constructed from seconds, decisions made in real time across continents. But now, beneath the soft hum of the hotel's overhang lights and the distant whoosh of rain-slicked tires, he did something unusual. He waited. He held the paper like it was alive. There was no name, no fancy envelope, just one sharp fold down the center, done with care. Like someone who knew how to make something small feel important. A doorman nodded toward him. "Sir, would you like help with your luggage?" Elon shook his head without words, barely hearing. He walked inside slowly, past the polished lobby floors, past the marble counters and the grand chandelier that always felt like it belonged to someone else's life. In the elevator, he kept his hand closed around the note like it might blow away if he didn't. No one else was in there, just the quiet hum of the rising numbers. When the door opened to his suite, he stepped in and placed the paper on the desk. He stared at it for a moment, then poured himself a glass of water. Took a sip, still watching. Then he sat. He unfolded it. The handwriting was simple, firm. A few uneven letters suggested the pen had paused more than once. Elon read the message once, then again. Sometimes the only way to carry someone you've lost is by giving a little of them to someone else. That was it. No signature, no request, no further explanation. But the weight of it hit Elon in the chest with something sharper than sadness. It wasn't grief exactly. It was recognition. The kind of line that doesn't ask for attention, it just asks for understanding. And Elon, a man who often felt more comfortable solving the future than understanding the past, sat in stillness as the meaning curled into him. The face of the girl in the dashboard photo came to mind. Her missing tooth, the wide smile, the dog. She had a name, he was sure. And the man, the driver, had once lived a different life. One that had room for blooming trees and crayon drawings and laughter coming from a back seat. And now he gave that life away in pieces, small pieces, to strangers like Elon who didn't ask for anything more than a ride through the rain. Elon placed the note back on the desk and sat down. Not at his laptop, not at his phone, just sat. A long time passed. When he finally reached for his phone, he didn't call his assistant. He didn't check messages. He didn't even open the news. Instead, he typed the words, "Chicago taxi, late night, yellow cab, driver with gray cap." But it returned nothing helpful. No record, no name, no digital trace. The driver had entered and exited his life like a ghost, like someone who didn't need to be found, only to be felt. The next morning, Elon carried the note in his jacket pocket. He didn't know why, only that it felt wrong to leave it behind. At breakfast, someone from the conference approached his table. "Mr. Musk, would you have a few minutes this afternoon to speak about?" Elon held up a hand gently. "Not today." They looked confused. "It's regarding the..." "I know, not today." That afternoon, between meetings, Elon slipped into a small cafe 2 blocks from a hotel. No press, no entourage. He sat by the window and looked out at the street. He found himself watching the taxis more closely now, wondering, hoping. Something was happening to him, not a transformation, not yet, but a shift. Subtle, internal, the kind that can only be felt when life pauses just long enough to let truth in through the side door. And it all came back to that note, giving a little of them to someone else. By the end of the day, he had made up his mind. He didn't want to let this go. Not this time, not this man, not this story. If you've felt even a small connection so far, now's the perfect moment to subscribe. But not because we're asking. Subscribe if you believe stories like this deserve to reach someone else who might need them. And hey, if you've ever had a stranger shift your perspective with a single sentence, tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear about your taxi moment. Now, let's return to the story. Elon hadn't written anything down by hand in months. But now, seated at a desk inside his suite with the morning light peeking through sheer curtains, he found himself with a pen in hand and a small notebook open in front of him. The pages remained blank for several minutes. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he was trying to capture something that didn't belong to logic. He drew a simple line at the top of the page. Taxi driver, Chicago rain note. Underneath it, Bullet points formed as he traced back every detail. Older man, gray cap, jazz music playing, photograph of daughter and dog, one-sentence note, fare refused. Then, at the bottom, in larger print, who was he? It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something else. A pull, a whisper, a question Elon didn't realize he'd been waiting to ask for years. What if meaning finds you when you least expect it? And what if you don't chase it, you lose it forever? He canceled his morning meeting. Instead, he asked his assistant, without giving too much detail, to discreetly locate local taxi depots that served downtown the night before. No press, no reason, just a personal matter. By noon, he found himself sitting in the break room of a cab company on the outskirts of the city. The fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead. Coffee in the corner had turned into something thicker than liquid. A dispatcher named Maurice eyed him cautiously. "You're looking for a cabbie who didn't charge you?" Maurice asked. "What, did he insult your suit?" Elon offered a patient smile. "No, I just want to thank him." Maurice crossed his arms. "That's new." He called over a couple drivers, each shaking their heads at Elon's description. None of them knew a man like that, or they weren't saying, "He sounds like one of the old ghosts," said a driver with thick glasses. "You get one or two of those in this business. People who show up, work the streets quietly, and vanish again like they never punched a time card." That stuck with Elon. Old ghosts. By the end of the visit, he still had no name. But he had something more dangerous. Wonder. And once that spark lit, Elon couldn't smother it. He began asking around the hotel. Bellhops, concierge staff, even the valet team. No one had seen the cab. No one recognized the description. But one valet said something interesting. "Sir, with respect, we don't usually get people like you taking yellow cabs. Most VIPs use the executive car service or come through the underground garage." "I didn't plan to," Elon admitted. "He just stopped." "Then maybe you were supposed to." That line echoed in Elon's mind the rest of the day. It wasn't spiritual, not exactly, but it felt like a breadcrumb in a trail he hadn't realized he was following until now. That evening, back in his suite, Elon stood by the window, watching the street below. The rain had returned, heavier this time, washing the sidewalks, turning headlights into glowing orbs. He took the note out of his pocket again. Reread it. Let the silence between the lines do its work. He didn't know how to find the driver. Not yet. But he knew this. He wouldn't stop trying. Because something about that moment, about him, felt like a key to something Elon hadn't dared open in a long time. By the third day, the rhythm of the conference meant nothing to him. The meetings, the dinners, the polite applause during keynote speeches, all of it blurred into background noise. His mind was no longer orbiting product launches or market trends. It was circling a taxi, a voice, and a single folded note that refused to leave his pocket. That morning, he dressed differently. No suit, no lanyard with his name printed in bold. Just jeans, a black hoodie, and walking shoes. He passed through the lobby without drawing much attention. No cameras, no handlers, just a man moving through a city with something unresolved burning in his chest. He walked the streets slowly. The weather had shifted. The sky was layered with heavy clouds again, the kind that made the light seem cinematic, like the city itself was holding its breath. Elon watched every cab that passed him. Most were empty. Some held passengers, headphones in, eyes on phones, disconnected from everything around them. He didn't expect to see him again, but he hoped. He didn't know why the encounter had shaken something loose inside him. Maybe it was the stillness in the man's eyes. Maybe it was the way he didn't flinch when Elon Musk stepped into his cab. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the way he had looked straight through the noise of who Elon was and simply said, "You're carrying enough." Who says that? Who knows that? He turned a corner and walked past a bookstore with a yellow awning. In the window, a display read, "People who change your life without trying." He almost laughed. The universe had a wicked sense of timing sometimes. He kept walking. At the edge of Grant Park, just before the footpaths gave way to quiet trees and sleeping flower beds, he he saw a bench. Not much to it. Metal slats, peeling paint, a view of the street where taxis came and went in uneven waves. He sat, pulled the note from his pocket again, unfolded it slowly. He stared at the sentence, read it in his mind, then read it aloud for no one but himself. Sometimes the only way to carry someone you've lost is by giving a little of them to someone else. He whispered it again, and in that whisper was something that caught him off guard: grief. Not grief for someone specific, but grief for all the things he had never slowed down enough to feel. People he'd lost, moments he'd missed, kindnesses he'd dismissed because they didn't serve a goal. That cab ride was no longer about curiosity. It was about accountability, about rediscovering something he hadn't realized he'd left behind. That evening, he flagged another cab. Different driver, younger, talkative, but Elon didn't say much. He watched, listened, asked a single question as they rode through the darkening streets. You ever lose someone you couldn't stop carrying? The driver didn't answer right away. Then, glancing in the mirror, said, I think we all do. That's why we keep driving. Elon paid in full this time, even tipped generously, but the connection didn't hit the same way. Still, it reminded him, this city was full of people holding unspeakable things behind ordinary jobs. And if Leo, he'd started calling him that, even if he never knew his real name, was one of those people, Elon wasn't ready to let him vanish into the fog, like just another passing stranger. So, he returned to the bench the next day, and the next, always hoping. And slowly, quietly, something was changing inside him. It wasn't that he was becoming someone else. It was that he was remembering someone he used to be. By the 5th day, Elon was a regular at the same park bench. A strange thing happens when someone like him stops moving. People begin to notice him differently, not as a name, but as a presence. Some gave double takes. A few approached with caution, as if unsure whether it really could be him. Others left him be. It didn't matter. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to see. He learned to recognize the rhythm of the city, the way the pigeons circled the fountain mid-morning, the sound of city buses downshifting just before the light, the exact moment when the sun cracked through the tall buildings and turned the sidewalk into golden lace. But mostly, he watched the taxis. He'd taken more cabs that week than he had in the past 5 years combined, never once mentioning who he was. He always sat in the back, asked soft questions, and left generous tips. Not to be kind, but because for the first time in a long time, he was listening. One driver told him about losing his brother in a factory fire, and how every ride after that felt like a chance to keep moving. Another described working 3 jobs so his daughter wouldn't feel what it meant to have less. A third said nothing at all, but he kept a picture of a soldier taped to his visor. When Elon asked about it, the driver just nodded and said, he drives with me now. They were each a new fragment of the same truth Elon had been circling since that night in the rain. Their lives being lived in silence, depth behind the steering wheels of invisible people. And Leo, his Leo, had been one of them. That afternoon, a familiar jazz tune floated from a nearby cab's window. Elon's heart stuttered. He crossed the street quickly and tapped the window. The man behind the wheel was older, yes. Wore a cap, yes. But it wasn't him. Sorry, Elon muttered, stepping back. The driver called after him, looking for someone. Elon nodded. Just a driver. Gray cap. Quiet. Plays jazz. Keeps a photo of a little girl on the dash. The driver's eyes softened. He turned down the music. Could be you're talking about Samir, he said. But he doesn't drive regular hours. And he doesn't talk to many people. Elon leaned in. You know where I could find him? The man hesitated. He works nights, mostly South End. Doesn't use the apps. Just drives his route. Old school. Doesn't like to be followed. Do you think he'd remember me? The driver gave a half smile. If you're carrying that note in your pocket, then yes. I think he would. That was the first time anyone else had mentioned the note. It stopped Elon cold. You've seen one before. The driver nodded once. Not the same, but I got one. 3 years ago. folded under my coffee cup. No name, just words that got under my skin and stayed there. I still keep it in my glove box." Elon exhaled slowly. "Why do you think he does it?" The man shrugged. "Maybe to carry something. Maybe to let something go." He handed Elon a napkin with an intersection scribbled on it. "Try there, but don't chase him too hard." Elon frowned. "Why not?" "Because some people don't want to be found. They just want to be remembered." That night, Elon rode alone again, but the bench felt different when he passed it, because now the search had shifted. He wasn't looking for a man. He was looking for what the man carried. And in some quiet way, maybe for the first time, he was starting to carry it too. The address on the napkin wasn't an exact place. It was an intersection, a crossing point. The kind of corner that didn't show up on maps of importance, but where lives touched every day. No high-rises, no valet service, just an aging gas station, a donut shop that had seen better decades, and a laundromat that always left the door open to let the detergent-scented air spill into the street. Elon arrived at dusk, the sky bruised with deep purples and golds, the kind of light that made even forgotten corners look cinematic. He didn't expect a welcome party. He didn't even expect the driver to be there. He just sat, waited, watched. After 20 minutes, a cab pulled into the lot across the street. It was older than most, its yellow faded, headlights a little cloudy. The man behind the wheel wore a cap. Gray. He had that same upright stillness, the kind that wasn't posture but presence. Elon felt his heart start to beat faster. Not because of nerves, but because of meaning. This was him. It had to be. He stood and began to cross. But before he reached the other side, the cab pulled away again, slowly, deliberately, turning down a side street and vanishing into the mesh of buildings. Elon stood frozen at the curb, blinking. It didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like an invitation. He spent the next 2 hours walking those streets. No driver. But what he found instead were conversations. Fragments. People who knew a little. Remembered a ride. A gesture. An older woman selling flowers out of a pushcart said softly, "You look like someone who's been changed." That means he probably found you already. A man sweeping the sidewalk in front of a shuttered barbershop paused when Elon described him. "Oh, the man with the notes," he said. "Yeah, he leaves them sometimes in the tip jar. No money, just messages. Makes you feel like someone whispered back a piece of your own soul." Elon listened, collected these pieces like someone building a map from candlelight. He didn't find the driver that night, but he found a bench with a folded napkin under the armrest. It was dry, clean, like it had been placed there carefully. On it, scribbled in that same unmistakable handwriting, "If you can see a person clearly, even once, you carry them with you forever." Elon sat for a long time with the napkin in his hands. He was starting to understand. This wasn't about tracking the man down. It was about understanding the legacy he left behind, in ordinary corners, inside ordinary people, in moments so small they usually slipped by. But not this time. This time, Elon was paying attention. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't in control. And that somehow was the beginning of something truly rare. The morning after he found the napkin beneath the bench, Elon returned to the same corner. The clouds had pulled back slightly, revealing that muted blue Chicago sky, the kind that feels distant but watchful. He carried the napkin folded in his pocket, carefully, like a fragile key he hadn't yet found the door for. The laundromat was open. The flower woman waved from her cart. And across the street, a small cafe he hadn't noticed before now drew him in. No sign above the door, just a wooden open, plaque swinging on rusted chains. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and patience. The walls were mismatched with bookshelves and forgotten postcards. There were 3 tables, all of them occupied by people who looked like they'd been coming here for years. The barista behind the counter, an older man with hands like crumpled paper, looked up and smiled. "You're new," he said. Elon nodded. "I think I'm looking for something." The barista tilted his head, curious. "Aren't we all?" Elon ordered coffee, then sat at the window. The same view as the bench. just warmer, safer. After a few minutes, the barista approached with the coffee in one hand and a small leather-bound notebook in the other. "This might sound strange," he said, "but I think this is for you." Elon blinked. "Excuse me." The man placed the notebook gently on the table. "Every few months, someone drops one of these off. Always anonymous, always wrapped in paper. We don't know who does it, but inside there are letters, observations, notes to strangers. Kindness is remembered. No names, just moments. People who came through this street and were seen." Elon opened the cover. Inside, the handwriting was familiar. That same curve of the lowercase s. That same pause in every T. It was him, Leo, or whatever his name truly was. Page after page held fragments. "She cries into her phone every Thursday. I don't know who's on the other end, but I hope he finally listens. The man at the crosswalk always feeds the pigeons after pretending to shoo them away. That's how you know he's still tender. Someone gave me a coffee today and said thank you like they meant it. I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget the sound of it." Elon turned the pages slowly, reverently, like scripture. It was a map, not of directions, but of presence. Of how this quiet driver had seen the world around him in such piercing detail that he had no choice but to write it down and share it. Not for praise, but so it wouldn't disappear. At the back of the notebook was a folded sheet of brown parchment. Elon unfolded it carefully. "If this notebook finds you, it means you've seen something too. Maybe not clearly, maybe not yet, but enough to start looking. Keep watching. The world doesn't need more heroes. It needs more witnesses." Elon closed the notebook with shaking fingers. Something in his chest cracked open. He didn't know what to call it, but he knew it wasn't about closure. It was about opening. He looked up at the barista. "Do you know who he is?" The man shook his head. "No one does. Some say he's just a cabbie. Others say he's a writer, a preacher, a man who lost someone and never stopped leaving pieces of her behind." Elon swallowed. "Whatever he is," the barista continued, "he leaves behind more than most people ever do." That evening, Elon returned to the bench with the notebook tucked under his arm. He didn't wait for the driver anymore. He waited for the next clue, because now he knew. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning to speak. Something shifted in Elon after the notebook. It wasn't dramatic. There was no tearful awakening or thunderclap epiphany. It was more like a dimmer switch turning up in a dark room. Little by little, corners of a world he had long ignored came back into focus. The cab driver wasn't just a man anymore. He was a mirror, and Elon was finally looking into it. He started keeping his own notebook. Just a small black one. No labels. No branding. He wrote in it with the same pen he used for signing billion-dollar contracts, but now the ink spilled onto paper more personally than it ever had before. On the first page, he copied one of the notebook's entries. "Keep watching. The world doesn't need more heroes. It needs more witnesses." Each day, Elon wrote something down. A face he saw, a moment that lingered, a gesture that might have gone unnoticed if he weren't trying to notice. At the cafe, the barista slid a coffee across the counter and said, "You're staying longer than most people do." "I guess I'm learning how to stay," Elon replied. The other patrons grew used to him. They called him the man with the notebook, unaware of who he really was. And Elon liked it that way. No weight of identity, no expectations, just presence. One evening, just before closing, a teenage girl with chipped nail polish and a backpack full of textbooks walked up to him. "You're the one looking for the cab driver, right?" Elon paused, surprised. "Yeah." She glanced around, then pulled a small envelope from her jacket. "He left this here last week. Said someone would come who needed it." Elon opened it after she walked away. Inside was a single sentence. "It's not about finding me. It's about finding what I saw in you." Elon closed his eyes. He sat there for almost an hour, long after the cafe emptied, notebook open on his lap, pen resting in his hand. That night, as he walked back through the city, he noticed things he had passed a dozen times but never truly seen. The man in the wheelchair who always waited under the same flickering streetlight. The dog walker who whispered a name to every dog, no matter how rushed he seemed. The restaurant dishwasher stepping outside for 5 minutes of quiet with his coffee and earbuds. He saw them all now, and it did something to him. It made him feel human in a way the spotlight never had. It made him feel connected. At the hotel, he passed by a young woman at the front desk whose eyes were puffy with tears. Most people passed her by, but Elon stopped, looked her in the eye. "You okay?" She blinked, caught off guard. "I will be." He nodded. "Good. I'll bet you're stronger than whoever made you cry." She smiled. Just a little. Sometimes that's all it takes. The next morning, Elon left a note of his own under the napkin holder at the cafe. First time he'd done that. It said, "Thank you for teaching me how to look." He didn't sign it. He just walked out into the city. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a stranger in it. The notebook in Elon's pocket was now half full. Each page carried more than words. It carried the hum of a city he thought he knew, but had only ever skimmed. The scribbles were messy. He didn't care. It wasn't about writing well. It was about seeing deeply. And the deeper he saw, the more the silence around him began to sing. At the cafe, the barista began setting out 2 cups every morning before Elon even ordered. "One for you, one for the story," he said with a wink. Elon had become a regular in the best sense, not someone who occupied a chair, but someone who became part of the rhythm. One morning, a woman who looked about 70, wearing a green shawl and carrying a journal filled with pressed flowers, approached him. "You're the one with the notebook," she said softly. "I suppose I am." She smiled. "He gave me one once. Back in 22. I left a scarf on the bus and thought I'd lost my luck for good. When I got home, the scarf was there, folded, cleaned, in a bag with a note. It said, 'Sometimes the world returns what you lose, just to remind you it's still listening.'" Elon closed his eyes for a moment. The stories were stacking now, not in neat rows, but like stars scattered across the dark sky of his thoughts. No pattern, just a sense that something far bigger was unfolding than he could ever engineer. And then, for the first time in days, he stopped looking for Leo. Instead, he began living like him. He paid for people's meals and left before they knew. He wrote notes and hid them under napkins and bookshelves. One read, "You are not invisible." Another simply said, "Yes, you matter." He bought socks and hand warmers and left them under park benches in quiet zip bags. He started keeping a second notebook just for kindnesses he witnessed, big or small. He'd never felt richer. One evening, after a long walk, Elon returned to his hotel to find something folded carefully on the desk in his room. A single envelope. No address. No markings. But his name, written in that now familiar script. Just Elon. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside there was a card. Simple white. One line. "You stop searching. That means you're ready." He read it 3 times, then sat down on the edge of the bed, silent, heart pounding. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew what to do. He stood, slipped on his coat, and walked out into the night. The streets were quieter than usual. A soft drizzle blurred the city's edges, as if the skyline itself had been painted in watercolor. Elon walked with purpose, not rushing, but not wandering either. There was something unspoken in the card he'd received. A shift, a signal. He wasn't just part of the story now. He was being invited into its next chapter. He returned to the corner from that first night. The spot where the yellow cab had pulled up without warning, where a door had opened, and a voice had said where to, like it was nothing, when really it had been everything. He stood under the street lamp, notebook in his pocket, hands in his coat, eyes scanning the soft waves of traffic. 10 minutes passed, then 20. He almost turned to leave. But then, without a sound, a cab rolled to a stop beside him. The window lowered. Gray cap, calm eyes, a familiar silhouette. Elon's breath caught in his throat. No words were spoken. He opened the door, slid into the back seat. The man didn't look at him through the mirror. Not right away. He started driving. Only after the first few blocks did he speak. "You kept the note," he said quietly. Elon nodded. "It's with me still." The man gave a small smile. "Then you're one of us now." They drove for blocks without exchanging names, destinations, or pleasantries. Just silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full of weight, of respect, of something sacred. The kind of silence that only exists between two people who understand something too big for words. Eventually, the cab pulled into a quiet overlook above the city. The skyline glowed beneath them, and the rain had stopped just long enough to let the stars breathe through the clouds. The driver shut off the engine. "You found the notebooks," he said. "I found more than that. You stopped looking for answers. I started paying attention instead." The man nodded. "That's when it changes. When you stop searching for what you lost and start seeing what others carry." Elon looked at him. "You've lost a lot." "I've lost enough to understand what's worth giving away." "Your daughter." The man nodded once. No tears, just a quiet confirmation. "She made me promise something," he said, "that I'd never let the world forget how to feel. So I started with the people the world forgets." Elon swallowed, his throat tight. "And the notes? They're just reminders. We don't need big gestures to change people. We need reminders that someone sees them." They sat in silence again. Then Elon did something he hadn't done in decades. He reached into his coat pocket and handed the driver his own notebook, the one he'd filled these past few days. The man took it, opened it, flipped through a few pages, and then quietly, "You get it now." "I think I do." The driver returned the notebook. "You'll write more," he said. "Not because you have to, because you won't be able to stop." Elon smiled. "You were never hiding, were you?" "No, just waiting for you to see." The cab started again, slow, graceful, like it had done this hundreds of times. Because maybe it had. Elon didn't ask where they were going. He didn't need to. He was already there. It wasn't a goodbye. When Elon stepped out of the taxi at the edge of the pier, the city behind him still glowing like a living constellation, he knew this wasn't the end of anything. It was the continuation of something older, quieter, stronger. A legacy you don't build, you inherit, and then you choose whether to carry it. He turned to thank the man, but the cab was already pulling away. No dramatic pause, no wave, just taillights disappearing into the fog. Elon stood still for a while, letting the lake air wrap around him. He could still feel the warmth of the cab's seat on his back, still hear the steady jazz tune lingering like a heartbeat. He thought of the first time he'd heard it, how he'd barely noticed it, too busy being the man everyone expected. He wasn't that man anymore. Later that week, Elon boarded a plane to California, notebook in hand. He didn't tell anyone what happened. He didn't give an interview. There were no tweets, just a quiet return to work, and a difference that only those closest to him could feel. Meetings ran slower. People talked more. He started asking strange questions in the boardroom. What's something someone did for you that you never thanked them for? What's the smallest kindness you've witnessed this week? At first, his team looked puzzled, but eventually they started answering, and then they started writing them down. It spread, first in the hallway, then in the cafeteria, then in satellite offices. People started leaving folded notes for each other. One read, "You don't know me, but the way you help the interns matters more than you think." Another, "I saw you fix that broken door every week. Thank you for keeping our space safe." And without anyone naming it, a culture changed. The janitor found a note on his cart. The receptionist found one in her drawer. The security guard at the night shift had one taped to his thermos. Elon never claimed credit. He just watched. One afternoon, he walked past the small community garden near the office. He saw an intern sitting alone on a bench, wiping her eyes, a small folded piece of paper in her hands. He kept walking, not out of indifference, but because he knew what was written there wasn't his to interrupt. This was Leo's gift, the one he'd passed on without asking anything in return. And now it was moving without him, as it should. Later that evening, back in his private office, Elon pulled his notebook from the drawer. He read through the entries, pages now dog-eared and smudged. He flipped to the back and began a new one. Today, I witnessed the ripple, and I finally understood. You don't need to be remembered to matter. You just need to love out loud quietly. He closed the notebook and smiled. And somewhere in some other city, a yellow cab turned a corner in the rain, unnoticed by most, unforgettable to the right one. It was never about going viral. Elon never posted a word of what happened. He didn't turn it into a speech. There were no TED Talks, no podcasts, no sudden internal memos with bullet points and catchy slogans. And yet, without him meaning to, the story began to spread. Quietly, one folded note became 10. 10 became 100. People didn't know where it started. They only knew what it felt like. A small act of attention, a reminder that someone had noticed them. And in a world obsessed with being seen by many, something magical happened. People remembered the power of being seen by one. At a design meeting, an engineer left a note under a teammate's mouse pad. The way you light up when you talk about your mom, that's the kind of energy this project needs. A facilities worker taped one to a bathroom mirror. You've survived every single day until now. You're doing better than you think. The cafeteria manager found a folded note in the supply closet. You feed more than hunger here. And when Elon passed by these moments, he said nothing, but he felt them. One morning, he arrived at the Tesla campus early, the sky still dark. He liked those hours before the city woke up, when everything felt honest. As he walked the corridor toward his office, he noticed something taped to his door. Not corporate mail, not a briefing, a note, same handwriting. He froze. His heart climbed into his throat. He took it down carefully and unfolded it. You didn't chase me. You chose to see. That's why I came back. And that's why I'm gone again. But I'm not lost. I'm just where I need to be. And so are you. It was signed with a symbol, not a name. A simple drawing of a taxi with its headlights glowing. Elon read it twice. Then, instead of taking it inside, he walked down to the cafe near campus, the small, independent place he used to ignore, the one with the chipped mugs and mismatched chairs. He bought 2 coffees, left one on the corner table with the note folded underneath, walked out into the soft sun of a California morning, blinking gently as the world came into focus. Back at headquarters, people had started calling the notes something new. Taxi letters. They didn't know the origin. They just knew what it meant. A signal that someone, somewhere, had been paying attention. And Elon, he kept watching. Because once you start seeing people like that, you can't ever go back to blindness. Weeks passed. The notebook was now full. Elon had started volume 2. This one smaller, slimmer, easier to carry in the inside pocket of his jacket. The pages weren't just his thoughts anymore. They included moments shared with others, conversations, quotes overheard, small things that had become big only because someone finally gave them attention. He never planned to tell the world about Leo, but the world, somehow, began to tell each other. It started with a janitor at a Tesla branch office in Reno who left a handwritten message inside a vending machine. You work hard. I see it. That matters. Then a receptionist in Austin started leaving notes on co-workers' monitors after they'd gone home. Your laugh made my day better. You stayed late again. You're the reason the place runs. No one knew where it had started. They only knew it was real. And it spread faster than any algorithm Elon had ever built. One evening, he received a message from a woman named Marisol, a single mom and community center worker from Detroit. It came not to his corporate inbox, but through the general feedback page, buried among thousands. It simply read, I don't know who started the taxi notes, but one was left at our center today. It said, what you do is saving someone, even if they never say it. I cried for the first time in years, not because I was sad, but because someone saw me. If you know who did this, tell them, thank you. We needed it more than they know. Elon stared at the message for a long time. He didn't respond. He didn't forward it. He copied it by hand into his second notebook. Underlined the phrase, someone saw me. That same week, during a product demonstration, a developer pulled him aside after the cameras stopped rolling. "Sir, I know this isn't about cars," he said awkwardly, "but I just wanted you to know someone left a note in my daughter's locker last week. She's 12, struggles with reading, hates school. The note said, 'You're brave for showing up anyway.' She's been different ever since, like she has armor now." Elon placed a hand on the man's shoulder. Didn't say a word, because there was nothing to say. These weren't just notes anymore. They were translations, reminders from a quiet language that people forgot they spoke. Kindness, unscripted. Humanity, handwritten. Legacy, anonymous. It was a gray afternoon in San Francisco when Elon returned to the city where it had all started, not physically, but spiritually. The rain had followed him again, soft and cold, settling into the streets like memory. He had a meeting scheduled at one of his smaller operations hubs, but for once, he let the team know he'd be arriving late. He needed to take a different kind of trip first. He asked the driver, not a company car, just a cab he hailed, to take him nowhere in particular. "Just drive," he said. The man looked in the mirror. "You sure?" Elon smiled. "I'm sure." The car moved through the city's veins. Each street another artery of stories Elon no longer rushed to outrun. He looked out the window and saw them all, the people, the pauses, the almosts and nearlys. And as they turned past a narrow alley filled with steam rising from a street vent, he tapped the glass lightly. "Here," he said. The cab stopped. He stepped out, walked 2 blocks, and found what he was looking for, a tiny diner he remembered from years ago. Back then, he'd only gone there once. A quick breakfast, forgettable coffee, just another stop in the blur of schedule and pressure. But now, he saw it differently. The chipped tiles, the same woman behind the counter, the same man at the window seat reading the same old newspaper, probably decades retired but never resting. He ordered black coffee and a pen. The waitress raised an eyebrow, but brought one. He opened his second notebook and carefully tore out a page. No introduction, no explanation, just this. The smallest voices often carry the deepest truths. If you're reading this, it means you've been seen, and that matters more than you know. He folded it twice, wrote nothing on the outside, left it under the napkin holder at the edge of the counter, and walked out. No one stopped him. No one recognized him. But the air felt warmer, like a thread had been pulled, not undone, but connected. That night, he flew to New York. At the hotel, before sleeping, he received a text from someone on his senior team. It included a photo. A handwritten note had appeared in the staff break room of the Houston facility. "You made someone feel safe today, even if you didn't realize it." Elon didn't smile. He closed his eyes and whispered to no one in particular, "Thank you, Leo." Elon didn't plan the gathering. It happened the way the best things do, organically, softly, like ripples finding each other on a still lake. It started with a message board post from a junior software engineer in Berlin. "I found a note taped to my bike this morning. It said, 'You've survived everything so far, why not this too?' I didn't know how much I needed that. I want to pass it forward. Who else has gotten one?" Within 48 hours, the thread had over 3,000 comments. Not likes, comments. Each one was a story. Notes found inside books, behind coffee machines, under keyboards, even tucked into boxes of takeout. Some were funny, others were sharp with honesty. But all of them had one thing in common. They saw someone, and as the thread grew, something remarkable began to happen. People didn't just share the notes they received. They started writing their own and posting them, not for praise, but because something inside them had shifted. Even those who never met Leo, who never rode in his cab or held one of his carefully folded messages, were now part of his invisible choir. At SpaceX, a technician left a note for a night shift cleaner that simply read, "This place would fall apart without you." At a Tesla service center in Phoenix, a customer found a message in the Waiting Room magazine. "The fact that you're here means you haven't given up. That's heroic." And in a high school in Idaho, a group of students started leaving taxi notes in every locker once a month. No names, no agenda, just light. Elon watched it unfold without interference. He didn't trademark it, didn't build an app, didn't turn it into a campaign. Instead, he bought 1,000 blank notebooks hand-bound and had them shipped anonymously to shelters, community centers, libraries. No branding, just a small card inside that read, "A story left behind is still a life being lived. Write yours." Then one morning, as he sat at a small table in his own office, the sun pouring in sideways through the window, he found a note waiting under his notebook. He hadn't seen anyone come in, hadn't heard the door. But there it was, folded once. The handwriting, slightly different this time. Slanted, precise. He opened it slowly. "The ones who leave a light on for others never really disappear. You've become one of them." No name, no date, just the soft truth of it humming in the stillness. He didn't move for a long time, and when he did, it was only to reach for his pen. On the next page of his notebook, he wrote one word: torchbearer. Because that's what Leo had been. And now, so was he. Elon didn't speak for a long time. The wind rushed through the partially open window of the parked taxi, carrying the mingled scents of the city: roasted peanuts, exhaust fumes, wet asphalt. Sunlight streamed in golden streaks, glinting off the edges of the cracked dashboard. Ravi had just revealed the final chapter of his hidden life, a confession so raw, so achingly human, that it had shifted something deep in Elon's core. "I never told anyone," Ravi said, his voice low. "Not my friends, not the passengers I've picked up in this cab for years. But you looked me in the eye, and I felt like you actually wanted to know. Not just about the rides or the laughs, but about me." Elon nodded slowly, his face unreadable. But inside, a storm of reflection raged. He thought about how many moments in his life had passed unnoticed, how many connections he'd overlooked in pursuit of something bigger, faster, louder. And yet, here was a man who had nothing to prove, nothing to gain, but had chosen to carry the weight of the world quietly in his back seat. "I came here thinking I'd be the one asking the questions," Elon finally said, the corners of his mouth twitching into something close to a smile. "Now I'm wondering if maybe the real teachers don't wear lab coats or speak at conferences. Maybe they just drive you home when you don't even realize you're lost." Ravi chuckled softly, the kind of laugh that feels like an exhale after years of holding your breath. "Well, I don't know about that, but I do know people get in this car thinking they're going somewhere. Most of the time, they're just running away from something." There was a long pause. Elon stared at his own reflection in the rearview mirror, seeing not the billionaire or the engineer, but just a man with tired eyes and a heart that had somehow been cracked open in the simplest, most unexpected of places. "So what now?" Elon asked, his voice almost a whisper. "You've carried this secret for so long. Does it change anything saying it out loud?" Ravi thought for a moment, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the steering wheel. "It doesn't change the past, but maybe it changes how I carry it. Like I've been dragging this weight through every street in this city, and now it feels a little lighter." Elon looked out the window. The city buzzed on, impatient horns, flickering crosswalk signs, couples laughing over coffee outside corner cafes. But something was different, as if the rhythm of the world had shifted just slightly, enough for him to notice the humanity tucked in its corners. "I want to help," Elon said suddenly, turning to face Ravi fully. "Not out of pity, not because I feel guilty, but because you gave me something today that I didn't even know I needed. A reminder, a realignment." Ravi tilted his head, curious. "Help how?" "I don't know exactly yet," Elon admitted, "but I know this story matters. Your story, the people you've helped, the ones you couldn't save, the silence you carried, there's wisdom in that. And the world could use more of that kind of wisdom." Ravi didn't respond immediately. He stared out at the traffic, lost in thought. Then he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a weathered notebook. Its pages were filled with scribbles, notes, quotes, even little sketches of passengers he'd found particularly memorable. "I started writing them down," Ravi said, handing it to Elon. "Stories, moments, names I never knew, but faces I'll never forget. I don't know why I did it, maybe to keep from forgetting who I was." maybe to remember who they were. Elon opened the book, flipping through pages of humanity. A mother breastfeeding in the back seat after missing the last train. An old man holding a photograph of his late wife, whispering to it like she was still beside him. A teenager in tears, asking if it was normal to feel so lost. "These are beautiful," Elon murmured, the weight of each page settling deep in his chest. "This is more than a notebook. This is a mirror, one that shows us who we really are." And in that quiet moment, the seed of something began to take root. A project, a platform, not about space or rockets or AI, but about people. The kind of technology that didn't just calculate or optimize, but remembered. Something that could give voice to the silent passengers of a world, the Ravis of a road, the forgotten poets of the everyday. "I think you've got a book here," Elon said softly, not lifting his eyes from the pages. "Maybe even a movement." Ravi shook his head, a bit overwhelmed. "I didn't write it for that. I just wrote it so I wouldn't forget." And that, Elon said, closing the notebook with reverence, is exactly why it's powerful. A text pinged on Elon's phone. It was his assistant reminding him of a call with a foreign ambassador, something about green energy and trade incentives. The usual. But for once, Elon didn't feel the urgency to respond. The taxi had become a cocoon, its scratched vinyl seats and humming AC, a kind of sacred space. "Do you still drive nights?" Elon asked. "Always," Ravi said. "That's when the truth comes out." Elon smiled. "Then maybe I'll need another ride sometime soon." Ravi turned the key, the engine rumbling back to life. "Just don't forget your fare." They both laughed, deep, unguarded, cathartic. And as the cab pulled away from the curb, the sunlight chasing it down the block like a promise, it was clear something had shifted. Not just for Elon, but for anyone lucky enough to hear the story that was never meant to be told. And this was only the beginning. The hum of the tires against the road was steady, like a heartbeat. Elon sat quietly beside Ravi as the city rolled past, neon reflections bouncing off puddles, window displays glowing like stage sets for stories in motion. The air inside the taxi had shifted. Something sacred now lingered there, as if the walls of the car had absorbed the echoes of their conversation and were holding on to them, unwilling to let go. Neither man spoke for a while, but it wasn't awkward, it was reverent. As they approached a red light near 6th and Behringer, a group of kids on bicycles zipped across the crosswalk, laughing so hard they barely noticed the traffic waiting. Ravi smiled faintly. "That used to be me," he said. "Before everything. Before the fire, the move, the night shifts. I had dreams too. Big ones. They just got quieter." Elon watched them ride past, his mind painting over the city's noise with new colors. Maybe dreams don't disappear. Maybe they just change shape. Wait for the right moment to speak again. Ravi nodded, the faintest trace of something wistful in his eyes. Or maybe they hide in notebooks until someone's ready to read them. The car moved forward again, and Elon found himself wondering how many people he'd passed by, how many stories he'd walked through without knowing. He thought of the scientists he worked with, the coders and designers, all brilliant minds, but how many of them carried this level of quiet resilience? How many could teach him something not about what we build, but who we are? A notification buzzed on Elon's phone again. He glanced at it, then turned it face down on his lap. "I canceled my next meeting," he said. Ravi raised an eyebrow. "Didn't take you for the type to cancel anything." Elon smiled. "Normally I'm not, but I think this might be the most important meeting I've had in a while." The taxi slowed as they neared a park, one of those old ones that had somehow survived the concrete rush. Elon motioned gently. "Mind pulling over here?" Ravi complied, guiding the car to a quiet stretch near a line of rusted benches and leaf-dappled light. They sat there in silence again, but it was a different kind now, one filled with possibility. "You know," Elon began, "a few years ago, I had this idea. A platform where people could tell their stories. Not influencers, not politicians, just everyday humans. Real lives, real voices. I thought maybe AI could help preserve it all, categorize it, even turn some of it into interactive history. but it felt too abstract back then, too distant from what people actually felt. And now, Ravi asked. Elon turned toward him, his eyes bright with something more alive than ambition. Now, I think I understand it. You're the prototype. This cab is the archive. Ravi laughed, a full-bodied, unexpected sound that came from somewhere deep. You're seriously saying my beat-up Toyota is the seed of a new Elon Musk venture? Elon grinned. Why not? You've already built something most tech can't, trust. The idea began to grow like wildfire in Elon's mind. Not just a digital vault, but a movement, a series, a way for people to upload their stories anonymously or openly, accompanied by photos, voice clips, maybe even short AI-enhanced reconstructions, but always rooted in truth, in rawness, in heart. Ravi leaned back, his eyes scanning the clouds. Sometimes I think people just want to know they mattered, that someone heard them, even if they never said anything out loud. That's the core of it, Elon said. We keep building machines to make us smarter, faster, more connected, but what we need now are machines that remind us how to be human. The words hung in the air. Ravi reached down and handed Elon a small card from his dashboard. It was old and bent at the corners, a business card from a time long past. On the back, written in small, slanted handwriting, was a quote. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. I used to keep that in my wallet, Ravi said. Now it just lives here. Feels like the cab needs it more than I do. Elon turned the card over in his hands, his fingers brushing the worn paper like it was made of gold. Would you be willing to help me build this? Not just with your stories, but as a co-creator? Ravi blinked, caught off guard. Me? I'm a driver. I barely know how to operate the GPS without it freezing. You're more than a driver, Elon said. You're a historian, a philosopher, a teacher. I can get the developers and the coders, but I can't replicate your heart or your eyes. For a moment, Ravi was silent. Then he looked out the window again, watching the sun tip low over the city skyline, its light turning everything it touched into something soft, something forgiven. Okay, he said quietly, let's do it, but only if it helps others find themselves in the mirror. Elon nodded. That's the only goal. They sat there a while longer, planning the impossible as the sky began to melt into oranges and purples. Elon talked about a name, Echo Soul, maybe, or Voices Unseen. Ravi offered gentle nods, occasionally chiming in with a better word or a deeper question. It was the beginning of something neither of them could fully grasp yet. But they both knew one thing. This taxi ride had become more than a journey across town. It was a crossing, from one world into another, from silence into story. And for the first time in a long while, Elon Musk didn't feel like he was racing toward the future. He felt like he had arrived exactly where he was meant to be. The next morning arrived with a gentle hush, as if the world itself knew something had changed. Elon stood at the edge of a rooftop garden atop one of his less talked about buildings, a quiet research space meant for reflective projects, skunk works, soul work. The city stretched out before him, hazy in the early light, alive but not yet hurried. In his hand, he held Ravi's notebook. The spine cracked softly each time he turned a page, but it wasn't the words that struck him. It was the space between them, the pauses, the places where silence spoke volumes. Behind him, a team of trusted engineers and media thinkers gathered around a table strewn with sketches, whiteboards, and notes scrawled with ideas born less than 12 hours ago. Echo Soul was already in motion. Ravi arrived in his usual understated way. No entourage, no formality. Just him, his button down slightly wrinkled, his eyes calm but curious. Elon turned to greet him, extending a hand not as a founder, but as a collaborator. I hope you're ready for this, Elon said. Ravi smiled. I was born ready. I just didn't know what for. The project launched within weeks. What started as a simple idea evolved into a platform that invited users to share anonymous, heartfelt moments from their lives, things they'd never said aloud, or stories that had lived only in journals and memory. Echo Soul let them be spoken, honored, archived. AI assisted gently, only to shape narrative and preserve nuance, never to sanitize or judge. The first post? One of Ravi's entries, read in his own voice, set to a soft cinematic piano track, paired with a simple image, the rear-view mirror of a taxi, reflecting a blurred city at night. The response was staggering. Comments poured in by the thousands. People from every walk of life said the same thing. I thought I was the only one. Ravi kept driving, though less frequently. His cab became more than transportation. It became a studio, a sanctuary. With Elon's help, it was quietly fitted with discreet audio tools that allowed passengers, if they chose, to record short voice memos about their day, their past, their dreams. Some talked through grief, others through joy. Some just sat in silence, and that too was sacred. Elon, for his part, changed in ways no press release could capture. His public face remained the same, ambitious, driven, but those closest to him noticed something gentler beneath the surface. He listened more, not just in meetings, but in moments. The janitor who passed him in the hallway, the intern fumbling with a prototype, the elderly man at the deli who insisted he looked familiar. Elon didn't just hear them, he saw them. Months later, EchoSoul would be featured at the United Nations as a model for digital empathy. Not because it solved poverty or war, but because it offered something just as rare, acknowledgement. A reminder that behind every innovation, every progress bar, every satellite launch, there are beating hearts asking to be understood. One night, Elon rode again with Ravi. No cameras, no team, just the two of them beneath the hum of streetlights and a sky scattered with stars. You ever think about how all of this happened? Elon asked. Every day, Ravi replied, and I still don't believe it. Elon chuckled. You know what I think? I think the universe has its own GPS. We take wrong turns, hit traffic, reroute 1,000 times, but somehow we end up where we're supposed to be. Ravi looked over, and sometimes the detour is the destination. They drove on in silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had already been said. Eventually, Elon reached his stop, a modest apartment complex where one of his engineers lived. He was attending a small celebration for the birth of her first child. No press, no headlines, just family, just life. Before stepping out, he turned to Ravi one last time. Thank you for that day, for the honesty, for not trying to impress me. Ravi grinned. That was easy. I didn't even know who you were. They both laughed, and for a moment, Elon didn't feel like the CEO of empires. He felt like a man, tired, hopeful, changed. As the door clicked shut and the taxi pulled away, the streetlights reflected briefly in the rear window like sparks of memory. Elon stood still, watching the cab disappear down the block, until all that remained was the soft echo of its engine and the quiet thrum of his own heart. Inside his pocket, the quote card still rested, creased, faded, eternal. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most important invention of all. Thank you for joining this story. If it touched you in any way, drop a comment below with the city you're watching from, and let us know, what's your story that's never been told? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us all what it means to be human.